Today I wanted to do a video where I explain the topic of pain. Is it all in the body or is it in the brain? Pain science is an ever-evolving field. We're constantly learning new things about how pain works and how to properly deal with pain. Unfortunately, public perception of pain really lagged behind what pain science is at today and what we currently know. So in this video, I'm going to quickly go over the old model, explain the new model, and then give you some useful takeaways. Okay, so let's talk about the old model. The old model is really a very mechanical model. From what I've seen, this is really what most of the public thinks about when they think about pain. So in this old model, pain was thought about in two really concrete ways. It was either mechanical in nature, or sometimes it could be psychological. It either came from the structures of the body, which were injured, like a torn ACL or a strained muscle, or it was psychological in nature. In this model, the vast majority of painful conditions that people had were thought to be mechanical. Pain essentially signaled tissue damage. Once the damage healed, the pain should go away, or at least so this model says. In this model, the medical community would constantly search for the source of pain because you need to heal the source of pain in order to fix it, right? Well, this isn't really consistent with what we now know. The current model of pain is called the biopsychosocial model. I think it's important to understand a little bit about pain physiology to truly grasp this model, so I'll explain that briefly in a moment. But in this model, pain comes from the body and the brain at the same time. Oftentimes there is an initial mechanical injury, but then both the body and the brain take turns processing the information that is being received about the injured area, and in this processing of information is where things can become dysfunctional. Okay, so let's talk about pain physiology. So throughout the body, we have these tiny nerve fibers that can sense different inputs. Some of them sense things like touch, these are mechanical receptors. Some sense things like body position, these are proprioceptors. Others sense noxious, or painful stimuli. These are called nociceptors. In any case, these nerve fibers receive input that causes them to fire and then causes them to say to the central nervous system, hey, something's going on here. And then the central nervous system says to the brain, hey, something's going on here. And the brain takes all that information together and really processes it. And that's how we perceive things. So when someone first experiences an injury, what happens is nociceptors, the pain-sensing nerve fibers in the area are stimulated, which sends information to the central nervous system, which then sends information onto the brain that damage is taking place. And then in the brain, this information is then interpreted as pain. Where issues start to occur is when nociceptors are continuously fired. So we are constantly getting this negative input from the system. When this happens, the entire system can become overactive. It becomes easier for nociceptors to start to fire now that things are overactive, which then makes the CNS overactive, which then makes the brain overactive. It gets to this point where the CNS starts to fire at even the slightest of inputs. It'll fire when we're sensing just touch. The CNS will start to send signals to the brain that are interpreted as damage, even when nerve fibers that are stimulated aren't nociceptors. They could just be mechanoreceptors. The system becomes so used to going through this cycle that it starts to interpret perfectly harmless input, like gentle touch, to be painful. In addition to this process, the brain, when constantly bombarded with these signals of harm, starts to attach beliefs and emotions and attitudes to what you're feeling. And all of this really results in a cascade in which damaged tissue can completely heal, but a person will continue to experience very real and very intense pain coming from the area that was initially injured. So what the big takeaway here is currently people have an overemphasis on structural issues being the root cause of their pain. In many cases, the exact structural issue isn't that important. Over-focus on the structural issues leads to a lot of people going to improper types of care for their pain and injuries. Far too often we have people that decide that they want to rest as much as possible, thinking that the body will just heal on its own and the pain will completely go away. When in reality, this really isn't the best option, and the best option is to work through the pain to some extent, which is usually best done under a professional's guidance. So really, when you try to stay as active as possible without making things worse, we're essentially putting the body through a process known as graded exposure, in which the body and mind learn what it's capable of doing without getting these negative stimulus inputs. We learn what isn't harmful, essentially. So finally, just the whole idea here, pain isn't black and white. It's not coming from either damaged tissue or it's all in your head. It's coming from both your body and your brain at the same time. It's complex in nature, and trying to oversimplify it really doesn't help us out. And really what oversimplifying it does is it makes us focus on these very specific injuries, mechanical in origin, that aren't necessarily what are completely going on and may not need fixed in a certain way and may just need to be adapted to. I hope that makes sense, and I hope you found that helpful. If you have any questions, please leave it in the comments below.